Hello guys and gals, and welcome back to another episode of Haunted Gaming. This time we take a look at another LSD Dream Emulator creepypasta, and as you can see, LSD is in the air everywhere for now. But this one is simply called Gary. It's about an LSD Dream Emulator incident, so relax, sit back, and enjoy Gary. My name is Brian. I'm 28 years old and I'm a business analyst. I currently live in Seattle, but I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. I had a great childhood. Our neighborhood was fantastic. My father used to be an IRS employee and could give us a very comfortable life. But something drew my family away from Little Rock. My younger brother Gary died when he was 13. That changed my life forever. My parents had gotten divorced. I moved with my mom to Seattle and my dad moved to Los Angeles. 2 years later, my dad was found dead in his apartment, hanging from the ceiling. My mother died just 1 year from that, due to overdose from antidepressants. I don't consider myself a depressive person, yet I am much sadder and lowbrow than I used to be as a child. Perhaps I am just the one family member that resisted that event without suiciding, even though I feel somewhat guilty for the death of my brother. It took me more than 10 years to summon up the courage to tell you guys what happened. I'll tell you Gary's story. When I was 9, I got my first video game. A Nintendo Entertainment System. I played it all the time. Video games became my religion very quickly. I'd save money to buy cartridges. I'd go out and sell lemonade to my neighbors in order to buy video game related magazines. And when I was 11, I got a Super Nintendo Entertainment System for Christmas. By that time, Gary was already 5, so he could understand what video games were and often played with me. Although I often played and he watched, that's really what happened. But in 1998, we got a Sony PlayStation. And boy, was that a riot. My brother was 10 years old and insanely addicted to it. We fought a lot for the right to play, but he always won. I wanted to play, but by the time you're 16, your head revolves around other things, besides only video games. When I think back to the course of events, I can recognize a fateful day that changed our lives forever. It was the beginning of the spring in 2001. I was driving downtown, had just picked up my brother from school. He was 13. By this point, we passed through a game rental parlor that we used to go when we had our Super Nintendo Entertainment System. When we saw a paper written, "We're closing down, all for sale," Gary almost pulled the steering wheel, demanding me to go back immediately. We entered the place, and there was some people browsing through boxes of games and consoles. We digged on it. They were selling some PlayStation 1 games for $2 or $3 each. We got crazy. We were piling up games without even thinking about it. We'd already gotten around like 30 games. Crash Bandicoot, Sensible Soccer, Resident Evil, Spyro, Topal, etc. When we were paying up for our huge purchase, I saw a CD on a box by the counter that caught my attention. It was a blue and yellow case, and the front only said LSD. The back had Japanese stuff written on it. I asked the owner what the game was. He said he had no idea. The price tag said $3. I haggled a bit and got it for a buck extra. The owner seemed really sad for giving it all away. We paid and got on our car. That was a moment that changed my life forever. The following months were filled with gaming overnight, sleeping late, and playing a lot with my brother. We really bonded that couple of months. I helped him with his school assignments, and he listened to my complaints and fears about girls, the future, and these kinds of things. I remember one night when Gary was asleep, I got the LSD game that we hadn't played yet. I put it on and the opening was filled with nonsense, brainwash-like images and nonsense phrases all over it. A strange menu opened and I pressed start. The game started on a Japanese house. The controls were awful. The graphics were awful. The music was worse. The characters would do nothing but walk and turn around. Every step had this annoying sound and there was no exit from the stupid house. So I just took the game off and put on some Theme Hospital. My brother hated it, but I loved it. Thinking that $1 for LSD was a complete waste. As a prank to my brother, I told him the next morning that LSD was probably the best game on the whole PlayStation 1 library, and that I wouldn't let him play until he finished it. Of course, the first thing he did after school was look for it and plan it. That is what I feel guilty for. I bought it, and I was responsible for him playing this game. This fucking game that ruined his life, my family's life, my life. It all comes back to that moment when I got this evil thing from the hands of the man that and bought it. To my house. Gary came to me and said, "You really thought that game was the best? Are you stupid?" I laughed and told him he didn't understand it, just to see him strive with it for a while. By that time, I was busy with finishing my classes, tests, and parties. All that stuff in the end of your school life. I barely stayed home and barely talked to Gary, but once, when I was leaving home early, he came telling me that he understood LSD. That was a dream game. You played inside a dream, and every time you started a new game, it would be completely different, like the game is randomly generated. I found it impressive. Maybe I didn't just give it enough time and effort. But I had no time to waste on that, so I just forgot about it. So for like a month, I barely got in touch with my brother. Back then, I didn't even realize that, but today, I can tell that. Besides me being away and entertained with other stuff, my brother was awfully quiet and strange. He barely ate, barely talked, and never left the home. My mother often tried to discover what was up with him. My father told her to let it go, because every kid has a phase like this. I remember agreeing with him and dissuading my mom to take any measures about it. Once again, my meddling was part of the cause of this tragedy. On the morning of May 26, 2011, I woke up suddenly with a desperate scream from my mother. It was a sunny Saturday. I ran to see what happened. She was in Gary's room. I entered the room and felt a shock run through my spine. Gary was laying on the ground in the middle of a pool of blood. My mother was petrified. She couldn't move. All she did was scream. My father came right after me to the room, and he desperately grabbed Gary's pale, lifeless body, held it, and cried. Gary's head fell back on his arms, and we could see the gap opened on his throat. He cut his own throat with a kitchen knife. I ran to the bathroom and puked several times. My legs were weak. I couldn't stand. I cried and felt like there was no air to breathe. The neighbors heard the shouting and came in. They rushed and called 911 and the police and everything, and we couldn't do it. If they didn't do it, I guess we'd be there all day with Gary's body in the blood. They came, took us to the hospital, and one day later our neighbors held his funeral. As our house was being analyzed by the police and later cleansed from the blood, we couldn't understand. Nobody did. We never saw it coming. That was the hardest shock of all. The police said it was suicide because he left a note. He handed my mom the note that said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Dad. But I can't stand the gray man no more. I have to put an end to this. My head hurts too much. And Bri, I finally got it. In lunacy, the savage dream. I'll miss you all. Love, Gary." I couldn't understand it. Nobody could. I mourned on his death for like 3 months. I wouldn't leave my room, leave the house. I thought his pain would never stop. One day I was going through his stuff and decided to play some Tekken. I cried like a baby, remembering the times we shared playing video games. I found in his stuff a diary. I never knew he had a diary. Gary was a different kind of boy. He was creative and very artistic. He loved to write, but he kept that diary a secret from all of us. I decided to read it and figure out what made Gary do that. Reading it, I got shocked. It was that game, LSD, that game I bought and tricked him into playing it. He was obsessed with it. Almost all the entries in his diaries were about it. Since the day he played it for the first time, some pages he just drew like nonsense. On some, he described like passages of the game. On others, he wrote stuff that made no sense. But most of all, he kept writing about the Gray Man. It was a man that appeared in the game and erased his memory. He started seeing the Gray Man everywhere. Each page I read made less sense than the previous. Gary was completely losing his mind because of the game. By the end, it was all terrifying phrases and sketches. I didn't tell my parents about the diary nor the game. I couldn't watch them miserable like this, and bringing this would only upset them more. I started researching the game on my own. I found out it was a Japanese game, and the developer who made the game, it was based on this diary that he kept about his weird dreams. When I was trying to find a way to contact this man, though, I found out that he'd been killed. And apparently, someone obsessed by the game, like Gary, killed the creator, claiming that the Gray Man told him to. It chills my bones to this day. Just to remember this, it's obvious there's something off about this game. I summoned courage to try and play it sometime after Gary's death, but his copy was completely scratched. It looked like it was made by human nails. Maybe Gary scratched it to prevent himself from playing it. I still have the memory card where he recorded his development. If I'm not too mistaken, he played 600 or so days inside the game. I try to find copies of the game to this day, but it seemed to be very rare. I still can't believe how unlucky of me it was to find. Buy and take home this curse of a game. I know my mom and dad wouldn't approve of what I'm doing now. They were reserved people, but I'm sure that Gary would be thrilled to have his story on the internet. Since my parents are not here to reprehend me anymore, I will do more than just tell a story. I'll show you excerpts of his diary. Of course, I won't transcript it all, since it contained very personal stuff about my brother, but I will transcript here the entries related to the game and possibly some scans of it, if I can find a working scanner. Well, as you can see, LSD is alive and healthy, and this is the second one we've done on the game. The first one isn't available online anymore, for now, but this is the second. What did I think? Well, aside from the technical mistakes such as spelling and whatnot, which I'll let slide as a native language of the author, I assume, not entirely sure obviously, but I assume it isn't really English, but I thought it was nice until the end, which I'll get to in a bit. You really didn't have any cliches, and the introduction was nice, and it really set a somber mood. The game was then introduced, and, you know, you get the game through normal means, which, it's still weird to see such intense sales for PS1 games at $2 or $3 back in 2001, as PS1, as far as I know, was relatively old, and games wouldn't be that cheap, but I'll let it slide. The game is shown, and we get to the suicide after obsession, and learn of the Gray Man causing it to the younger brother. And if you don't know who the Gray Man is, he is a character in LSD Dream Emulator that appears as you play the game, and upon seeing the character, he will erase your memories, and you will have to restart from scratch, basically building up your status in a way. He'll erase the previous dreams you had. That's who the Gray Man is. Gary started writing this diary, and I was intrigued because I thought, hey, maybe this might just go full circle, because as the game LSD Dream Emulator is based on one of the employees' dream journals, I thought, hey, maybe Gary was going to start another dream journal. Yeah, but, you know, it ended on this, he kind of did, but it ended on this cliffhanger, which I'll get to shortly too. It gives a suicide note which details in lunacy the savage dream, which is one of the many phrases found in the game. Another phrase is such as, it's in leisure the sonorous dream, or in linking the sapient dream. You know how the words use LSD, like, you know, they begin with it ties in that way. All in all, it's a nice plot, and it has this enticing intro. Then we have a nice acquisition of the game and a slow decline for Gary until his suicide, which, you know, I do like as it goes through these points. Obviously I don't like the suicide, it's a little awful, but I like how the plot flows through. Because a lot of people, you know, myself included, who play this game, we feel weird, and I'll be honest here, I do ponder about what I play after every session of recording LSD Dream Emulator, so it is true the game has that inquisitive quality due to the nature. So really, this creepypasta is grounded in reality, and is something I can see happening right until you get to the end of this creepypasta. The ending was just wow. I mean, it should have ended 2 paragraphs before, because as soon as the creator being dead was mentioned, it killed the credibility it was building, as no one was killed. The creator wasn't. Osamu Sato, the creator of this game, is still alive to this day. You know, you can look at his Instagram account, and it's active. He didn't write the Dream Journal either, and the game can't be played to 600 days, only 365, as far as I know. I wish that wasn't included, as it didn't really have to be. It could have just went from, by the end, it was all terrifying phrases and sketches, to the last paragraph, and it would have been fine. That inclusion kind of pushed me away, and even in the end, we get this cliffhanger ending where we're supposed to get more scans of these journals, and I feel like this is going to become a creepypasta series that the author is going to write. I mean, I feel like it relatively just started, but we are going to get this, we are going to get more of these dream journals, maybe not. I don't think so, but I'm hoping we do, because it is interesting to see. I mean, and we did end up on a cliffhanger on a creepypasta that I enjoyed. But yeah, that ending really kind of pushed me away when you got, I mean, it was building up just fine. It didn't have to include that, and it would have just been fine. But, you know, what would you rate this creepypasta, and what would you change to make it better? This has been another episode of Haunted Gaming, and if you liked what you saw, then like, comment, and subscribe. This is me, Mudahar, and I'm out.